Hey, welcome to part 2 of my video looking at Bruce Malone's Astounding Evidence for a Young Earth. I had ended last one with a few of his dating techniques that are supposed to prove the age of the Earth as young. And I think I demonstrated how flawed they were. I'm going to do more of the same in this one. Just one thing I wanted to mention, most of you know I live in Alaska. I've been in Alaska for over 20 years now. And as an Alaskan, we had a governor, most of you know, thanks to John McCain. We have a governor who did not believe in an old Earth, who believed that the Earth literally was created in the biblical time frame. And I'm just going to show you guys a quick clip. This is from Sarah Palin's actual college days.
Oh, things were so much simpler before I became governor. So much simpler.
Now, who can tell me how old the Earth is? Yes.
4 billion years.
Negative. Yes.
4 billion years.
Wrong answer. Sarah.
What is 10,000 years?
10,000 years is correct.
And by the way, that teacher eventually grew up to be Professor Ian Juby. All right, let's get serious now.
Now, there's a bunch of dating methods that have to do with, where is everybody? Suppose early humans were supposed to have emerged about 4 million years ago. Let's assume that they only lived for 25 years back then. Let's assume there's a stable population of only 100,000. There's about 100,000 or so elephants in Africa, and they're on the endangered species list. Humans are a lot smarter, so that quite likely, even as if we evolved and they were emerging from trees, there would have been far more of them. But even with these generous assumptions, if we emerged 4 million years ago, only lived 25 years each, there's never been more than 100,000 people on the planet, there should have been 6 trillion human beings from apes turning into human beings that lived. We found a few false skull fragments. There's almost nothing out there. Where are all the bodies? You see, it fits what the Bible has to say. You can trust Scripture.
Now, I find this claim to be pretty funny for a number of reasons. One is that, he does his calculations, and now it doesn't. I'm not going to show that portion of it, but he says it here. Later on, when he's doing a similar thing with graves, he mentions that his calculations are nothing but simple math. For such simple math, he kind of fucks it up because, first of all, he says 6 trillion when his slide says 16 trillion. All right, that he just misspoke. But when you actually do the math that he talks about, you come up with 16 billion. That's only 3 orders of magnitude off, right? Hey, it's close enough for creationism, right? And so right there is I thought that was kind of funny. And I'm not sure if he just doesn't know math he's not very good at math, or if he's copying from another source and just copied incorrectly, or what the deal is. But the point is, he kind of messes that one up big. But the other issue, the other side of it is using his numbers. There's this really interesting thing that happens with bodies, right? When something dies, except under pretty extraordinary conditions, such as rapid burial, those bodies, well, they don't stick around very long, do they? If any of you have ever watched, forensics files, and see what happens when they find a body in the woods that have not buried, not in any way preserved, just dumped in the woods somewhere just a few months after a murder occurred, what do they find? Do they find an intact carcass? No, they find scraps of bones, pieces of bones, because animals chew on it, they get broken up, they get scattered by scavengers, all these different things happen to bodies. Now, if you think about just something to keep in mind, I, just for shits and giggles, decided to take his methodology and apply it to rats, Norway rats in particular. Looking at the current, modern population of Norway rats and extrapolating population growth and looking at, reproductive rate and everything. And then assumed that, there are only 2 rats 4,500 years ago. Well, you know what? We should have about 250 billion rat carcasses on Earth right now. 250 billion Norway rat carcasses. I haven't ran across... I mean, you see the occasional dead rat, but are we walking around through rat skeletons? Do every time we dig we find rat skeletons? We don't. And there's a really good reason for that, and it's the same reason why we don't find 16 billion or 6 trillion or 16 trillion human fossils.
And where are all the people? You see, as far back as we go in population studies, we find that historically, clear back to the time of Christ and beyond, where censuses were going and you can estimate population based on anthropology and studies, that the world population seems to have doubled every 150 years. And this is despite wars that wiped out massive numbers of people, famine and disease. The world population continues to double about every 150 years.
Now, Bruce Malone is just really talking bullshit here. I mean, this is something that I find unbelievable. Not because, I'm not used to creationists outright lying. But this isn't some complex scientific thing that, the audience has to take him at his word for, you know what I'm saying? This is something that any one of those people listening to this guy talk can go home and look it up. And he's not wrong because, I have to defend my atheistic evolutionary faith. He's not wrong because, I just simply have a different opinion or I'm interpreting his evidence differently. He's wrong because he's fucking completely wrong, okay? The world population has historically always doubled every 150 years. That's got to be the stupidest thing I've ever heard anybody claim, and I'm going to get into some detail in a bit here as to what's wrong with that. But, I mean, okay, how many people are alive today? Well, a little over 7 billion people, right? The world population has fucking doubled in my goddamn lifetime. Okay? I was born in 1968. In 1967, the world population was about 3.5 billion people. So it's doubled in my 44 years of life, right? Prior to that, the world population was 1.6 billion in 1900, right? So 1900 to 1967, that means the world population doubled, a little over doubled, in 67 years. I mean, do you see what I'm saying? And then prior to that, hold on, I took some notes here. World population was 800 million in 1780, right? So it doubled. It took, at that point, 120 years to double in that time period. Prior to that, though, as I had to take a guess because I didn't have the exact figures, 400 million in 1450. That's 330 years to double from that to the next period, to 1780. So this constant rate of human doubling is just a complete load of shit. And again, I'm going to get into some detail as to why it fails for him even. I mean, it doesn't work for his Bible chronology either.
Well, if you start with 6 people coming off the ark, Noah and his wife would have had no more children, so you have 6 people, 3 sons with 3 daughters, and you double them. It took them 150 years to be up to 12 people, which is very generous. You double it again, you double it again, you double it again, you'd find out you would have had to double it 30 times to reach the present world population. Only 30 times. 30 times 150 years for each doubling means that would take about 4,500 years of world history. That's about the time the Bible tells us Noah's flood happened and the people from the ark spread out across the world.
About 2 years ago, I made a video response to John Hefner. If I think about it, I will put a link down below about this human population claim. In that video, I show exactly how these numbers are derived in painful detail. My MS research was, in part, working with population biology, so I have a bit of background in this area. Like Hefner, Malone is employing the worst kind of circular reasoning. His 150-year doubling time for human populations is not based on some real-world observation. What it is the figure one would obtain if you assume that the world population was 8 about 4,500 years ago and needed to get it to 7 billion. It is force-fitting an exponential growth curve between an assumed beginning point and an observed end point, then claiming that the magnitude of the end point proves the fit of the equation. But just for fun, I graphed Malone's world population up to the beginning of the Common Era, or birth of Christ if you prefer. If you saw my video to Hefner, these will look very familiar to you. Plotting the numbers in a log scale makes the graph a bit easier to read. So let's see how many people were alive during some select world events. Well, Genesis chapter 11 tells us that the united world population, speaking a single language, attempted to construct a great tower before God scattered the people and created all of the world's languages. Looking back at some Bible chronologies, the latest that this event could have occurred was about 500 years after the flood, when the entire world population would have been 78. Does anyone remember the Exodus? When the Hebrews left Egypt to go wander around for a few years? The latest date for the Exodus I could find from apologist sources is 1150 BCE, when the world population was about 3,000 people. But wait, the Bible tells us that there were 600,000 Hebrew soldiers, men over 20, who left Egypt. That is not counting women and children. So, Bruce, is the Bible lying, or are you? Just for fun, I estimated what the world population would be today if Malone's population equation was fitted to a world population of 600,000 at the time of the Exodus. So if both Malone and the Bible are true, we have a current world population of 1.6 trillion. Continuing on more quickly, in the 10th century BCE, during the reign of King David, the world population was about 7,500. When the Babylonian exile occurred, the world population was 46,000, and when Jesus was born, we are up to a grand total of 700,000 people in the entire world. Throwing a few other events from outside the Bible, the Old, Middle, and New Egyptian kingdoms all happened before the planet had 5,000 humans on it. In fact, by the most conservative estimate I could find, the Great Pyramids were built when there were less than 50 people. The Battle of Thermopylae apparently involved 300 Spartans against the entire remaining population of the world at that time. I don't recall Gerard Butler fighting any babies, but oh well. The pyramid complex at Teotihuacan in Mexico was constructed when the world population was about 280,000. The city apparently housed 70% of the entire world population.
You can trust the Bible. You see, when you do the science, you compare it with the world around us, every time you find out you can trust the Bible. It's only when you start out with faulty assumptions you come up with faulty answers.
Here is where I would insert the Picard and Riker double facepalm picture.
I'm going to whip through a few of these fast. The Earth's magnetic field has shown a systematic decrease. In the last 150 years, it's decreased 15%. This has never been explained by natural scientific evidence. All sorts of speculation, all sorts of stories told about it, as we said. But the fact is, our magnetic field is significantly decreasing. If you work that backwards, you find out it would have been impossibly strong 10,000 years ago. It sets the age of the Earth under 10,000 years. So very strong evidence. It's never been refuted.
There are times when I'm really glad that I collect and read primary sources from creationists, and this happens to be one of those times. The claim that he's making here is based on Thomas Barnes' The Origin and Destiny of the Earth's Magnetic Field, written in 1973, and then subsequently built upon by his friend Russell Humphreys. There's a few problems with it. First of all, Barnes makes the assumption that the Earth's magnetic field is decaying exponentially, and he presents a table of numbers to show that, but the numbers don't even show that. His numbers, the numbers that Barnes gives, simply don't support an exponential decay. They show a fluctuating magnetic field within historical times when it's been measured. So right there, his entire concept is flawed. Russell Humphreys, now I want you guys to really enjoy this little bit of rigorous science. Russell Humphreys speculated that the Earth's magnetic field originated because, like in 2 Peter, the Earth was made from water, and since water is a polar molecule, when the water that formed the Earth and all the other planets, including the sun and everything in our solar system, used to be balls of water that God instantaneously spoke into other forms of other elements. And those elements retained the polar nature of the water molecules they were created from, therefore giving a magnetic field that would then begin to exponentially decay. Yeah, that's really good. I don't comprehend why these guys pretend that they're doing science at all. What's the point? Why not just say the Earth was created 6,000 years ago, and by God's miraculous nature, He made it look older, and all of this kind of stuff. If you're going to call it a miracle, the actual conversion of water into, rock, what's the need to even try to justify it through some scientific means? It doesn't make any sense to me. But anyway, this concept is flawed, and I can't believe that Malone made the claim that there's no scientific explanation for the Earth's magnetic field. Dynamo theory, bitch. What do you think? When Barnes published in 1973, there were excellent models for the Earth's magnetic field and its explaining its fluctuations and reversals, and we've only gotten better about it. Russell Humphreys is a paid liar, and Malone quoting him, citing him, using him as a reference, it's just a pretty piss-poor idea. I don't know.
When huge flood-like events happen, you don't get just a mixture, a mishmash of everything all blended together. When Mount St. Helens exploded in 1980, an enormous mud flow flowed down the mountain, and you've got fine layers, just fine little layers during this catastrophic flow event that was flowing down the mountain. This whole river valley formed in one day as water that was backed up behind a dam broke through the sediment and carved out this valley. See, that's the kind of thing that was happening during the worldwide flood.
Okay, so you're using Steve Austin and Andrew Snelling's research on Mount St. Helens to prove the flood. That's funny, actually, because you know what it really comes down to? Okay, see, this is what they report. This is what both Snelling and Austin have in various publications, in Institute for Creation Research publications. What they looked at Mount St. Helens, and they found out that 7 meters of ash and various other volcanic materials formed layers, right, in 9 hours during an eruption, meaning as the component of the eruption changed, different layers were produced, right? So that's the observation they made. And then they conclude from that therefore all the world's strata, all of the strata in every single place found on the planet could equally have been put down in just a short period of time. Because almost all of the world's strata is composed of volcanic materials. Oh yeah, no, it's not. It doesn't make a bit of sense unless you're, it's creation logic, all right. The other thing that they pointed out, this is specifically in Snelling. I didn't see where Austin had published this, but although he did talk about the Grand Canyon, because when I believe it was the dam at Spirit Lake, the natural dam, broke free, I think it was Spirit Lake, and water poured down the side of the mountain, cutting through this unconsolidated this ash that had fallen just hours before or days before, creating this valley in one day. Remember, it's about 7 meters thick, about 25 feet or so. So, because water flowing downhill can carve out a fairly substantial canyon in one day, therefore, the Great Flood receding could have carved the Grand Canyon through solid rock. Do you see where the logic fails? It's a ridiculous thing, but the slides look good. You see, because you can show a picture, especially in the full color versions of it, where you throw the big slide up on screen showing this ash, this water cut through the ash, to the person who knows absolutely nothing about geology or nothing about catastrophic processes or uniformitarian processes. It looks just like the Grand Canyon to them, so it fools the gullible, and that's the only purpose that I can see for that kind of logic, because I know for a fact that Andrew Snelling knows that it's full of shit.
And the whole universe is full of these. Spiral galaxies shouldn't still be spiraled up.
As I understand it, the winding up problem of galaxies originated because we had an incorrect understanding of galactic structure that's now been significantly improved, making this supposed problem for an old universe meaningless.
The moon should have receded further from the Earth than it is.
The moon receding argument, wow, it's been a while. You do realize that that's based on a creationist inability to do simple math and a creationist's inability to convert from metric to English units, right?
You know, comets should not still be in existence because they lose their material every time they come around the sun.
Except that new comets are periodically flung into our inner solar system, so it doesn't matter if they lose matter every time they go around the sun. New ones are forming.
You know, Saturn's rings and Jupiter's moon Io should not still be hot, and they should not still be in the patterns that they're in, unless they're not as old as we're told.
And that again, says who? Says creationists? Do you think I'm going to take their word on anything scientific?
The most prolific dating method that you hear about constantly is radiocarbon dating, and this is the last one I'll talk about. See, radiocarbon forms as cosmic rays, high-energy rays, come into the atmosphere, and they hit a nitrogen molecule, blow it apart. Some of the particles from the nitrogen particles recombine to form a carbon-14 particle, which combines with oxygen to form radioactive CO2, which the plants take in, and they get radioactive CO carbon in them, and the animals eat the plants, and they get radioactive carbon. And the radioactive carbon gets uniformly spread throughout everything that's alive.
The nitrogen molecule gets blown apart and then the particles recombine to form carbon-14? I get what you're saying, but you know, you're a chemist. I think you could do a little better than that.
And as long as you're alive and you're eating anything, you're taking in radioactive carbon in the same proportion that's in the atmosphere.
Now I want you to just, I put that little clip in there because I want you to be clear, I want my audience to be clear, that Bruce Malone understands this proportion of carbon-14 in the atmosphere and proportion of carbon-14 in living organisms. Okay, I just want to make that clear.
Well, the thing about radioactive carbon is that we've measured it very accurately, and every 5,720 years, if you stop eating, in 5,720 years, all the cells and all the carbon parts of your body, half of that radioactive carbon will have decayed. So if you measure how much radioactive carbon is left in your body 5,000 years from now, or some unknown, and you have half as much as you have today, you would come to the conclusion that it was 5,730 years since you died. It really makes sense. It's a good dating method.
That sounds fair, and I more or less agree with what you said there, what Bruce Malone said. However, it's the last thing that he's going to say in this talk that I, well, will agree with.
But it makes a huge assumption. Well, I'm going to go back. It assumes that there's always been the same amount of biomatter in the world. You see, God described the world as a paradise before the flood. Huge amounts of water had to have been trapped underneath the earth before the flood. It said the fountains of the great deep broke up. There could easily have been 10 or 100 times as much vegetation. There's no ice caps, no deserts, lots more vegetation. If the same amount of radioactive carbon was forming before the flood, and there was 10 times as much vegetation, then the concentration of radioactive carbon in everything that's alive would have been 10 times less. So if you dated it right after the flood, you would think that a whole bunch of it had disappeared if you made the wrong assumptions.
All right. Bruce Malone. First of all, he's just like throughout the rest of this talk, he's copying, poorly I might say, other claims from creationists. This one is from John Baumgartner, another Institute for Creation Research speaker, who the first one that I've ever seen that makes this biomass claim, essentially saying that if there's more biomass, then the proportion of carbon-12 to carbon-14 is going to be less, therefore making the apparent age look greater. That's the claim. On the surface, it sounds okay, but again, I want to emphasize this. Bruce Malone is a professional chemist. Bruce Malone knows how things like concentrations and all of this work. And I'm gonna switch to some slides here and just give you a brief explanation as to why he's wrong. Let's start with a large pool of water, maybe swimming pool sized. The water in the pool has a salt concentration of 10 psu, that is 10 partial salinity units. By the way, in older works you will see salinity measured in ppt, or parts per thousand. PSU is equivalent, but is now preferred as it is standardized across different water temperatures. Anyway, once the system is set up, you add a grape. The grape has a salt concentration of 0 PSU, that is, fresh water. If you allow the grape to sit until it reaches equilibrium, you will see that the grape now has a salinity equal to the surrounding water. Pretty simple so far. Now you add 2 grapes. What will their salinity be after equilibrium? Remember, there are now twice as many. Will it be 5 PSU in each? No, that's ridiculous. The concentration of each will be the same as the surrounding water. What if we add 10? Does each grape then reach equilibrium of 1 PSU, or 1/10 of the surrounding salinity? No. Again, each will have the same concentration as the medium. One important point to note. The reason for having a large body of water in this example is to nullify the effect of dilution from the fresh water in the grapes. It's not a perfect analogy, but I think it explains why Bruce is so wrong. Oh, and by the way, just to make it clear that when I used my analogy, or my, the swimming pool sized body of water to make it insignificant, that actually does apply to our atmosphere. I did some calculations on the volume of the atmosphere and the volume of all living things on the Earth. And the ratio is about 1 to a million, meaning the atmosphere is 1,000,000 times more volume than all life on Earth. So even if you had 100 times or 1,000 times the amount of biomass, you're still not you're not enough to significantly dilute the ratio of carbon in the atmosphere. So,
you see, all radiocarbon dating does is assume that there's never been a worldwide flood, and therefore they come up with huge long ages.
He is actually right about that. In Arnold and Libby's 1949 paper describing radiocarbon techniques in aging materials, they state right in the discussion that their method makes the assumption that the Bible is wrong, and there's never been a worldwide flood. It's written right into their paper. It's not, dumbass.
The fact is, every single atom of radioactive carbon should be gone within 250,000 years. There shouldn't be an atom of it left. If something that used to be alive 250,000 years ago died, by today, if that amount of time had passed, there should be no radioactive carbon left. It should be gone. 0. Zip.
You're right. So all of the original carbon-14 that organism fixed into its body tissue during its lifetime is gone after about 200,000 years. So we're in complete agreement. We're done here, right?
This is absolutely astounding fact of science that's just ignored.
Oh, do tell. I love those dirty little secrets in science, those things that, those evil scientists ignore, as in don't study, don't research, don't publish about, we just keep hidden under the carpet. I love to hear about these things.
Every single molecule on this planet of organic origin contains 0.1 to 0.5% of the modern level of radioactive carbon. Dinosaur bones have 0.3 parts of radioactive carbon. Coal seams from every level in every area of the world have 0.1 to 0.5% of modern radioactive carbon. Fossilized wood, shells, graphite, even things that were never alive have radioactive carbon in them. It shouldn't be there. You know what this is called by the scientific community? It's called background levels of radioactive carbon. They went through an extensive program, a 10-year program, to purify with every possible way they could to get rid of this background, what they're calling background level of radioactive carbon, and they totally failed. It's always there no matter how they try to purify it or eliminate contamination.
All right, Bruce, I'm a little confused here. Is this fact ignored, or is it studied for 10 years? I'm a little confused as to what exactly, what is it? If we're studying something for 10 years, I don't know that really defines ignoring it. Do you see where I'm going with this? Just a little unsure as to, your point. But I want to get into a couple other things about this background levels of radiocarbon. First of all, every organic molecule contains radioactive whatever. That's simply not true. The facts don't hold it up. That claim's been made. That's one that I've seen Russ Miller make. I've seen Kent Hovind make. And the people at RATE, the Creation Research Institute for Creation Research study on radiocarbon and radioactive isotopes, they reported that many samples of organic origin, oil, coal, things that should have long decayed, contain radiocarbon, but not all of them. There are samples without it. And this is the funny thing about it. Now, there's a couple of points I want to make here, and this is going to be a little lengthy. I apologize. First of all, let's just say for shits and giggles that those numbers are actually accurate, right? So, and that radiocarbon, that 0.01% and all of that you're reporting, or that the RATE group is reporting in organic things of old organic remains, let's just say that that's actually the original carbon-14 still remaining, proving that they're not millions of years old, right? You would be correct. But you know what you still have to explain? Those numbers, then, if they were the original radiocarbon, give ages of 80,000, 100,000 years old, which is still, by my reckoning, about 10 times older than your Bible allows for the age of the Earth. Do you see see how that works? But then when you read the RATE reports, now this is what's really hilarious, is now that anomaly, they explain that anomaly away by making the claim that, oh, that's contamination. Some of this oil, some of this coal was near uranium deposits, and that can create C14 in the sample. In other words, when it disagrees with the Bible age, well, that's contamination, right? But its actual presence is proof of the Bible. It's very, very let me find my words. The fact that there's any radiocarbon is used to defend the idea that the Earth is young. But then when people point out that, well, that says that the Earth is still far older than you need it to be, well, they say, well, that result is from contamination. That's C14 being contaminated into the sample. It's just an incorrect statement to make. But the point is that it's false anyhow. I mean, it's simply not the case. There are organic samples with zero radiocarbon in them.
We ought to treat the Bible with equal fairness, even if we can't prove it with evidence.
Why? Why should we? You're saying that even though we can't prove the Bible is true, in fact, we can't prove basically anything out of the Bible. None of the supernatural events in the Bible are testable. But you know what? We should treat them, as equally possible as to all those things in the world that we can observe and can test. That doesn't make a lot of sense to me.
I decided long ago it was less difficult to believe that the Bible is what it claimed to be than to disbelieve it.
What that's called is academic laziness, okay? You're saying it's easier to believe, meaning, yeah, of course it is. It's easier to accept without evidence a bunch of stories as factually correct than it is to learn the hard science that actually explains reality. I don't see why you think that's superior, though.
So when someone dies, when something really horrible happens, guess what the non-Christian, their natural response is? Well, this is the way things have always been. God must be responsible for it. And there's anger. And there's a rejection of who God is.
Okay, I have to be honest here. Bruce nailed me. It's true. As an atheist, as somebody who doesn't believe in a God or any supernatural deity or powers or anything like that, my first response to, something bad happening, a tragedy, a death, anything that's hard or difficult in my life, my gut reaction, the first thing I do is I hold my fist up to the sky and I say, Hasa Diga Ibowai. I blame God because it's, as an atheist, I know that God's really responsible for all of it. Okay, I'm gonna now this is the last I had mentioned in part 1 during his half-hour beginning intro to this. He mentioned there was a specific point he made, and I said I'm going to put that at the end, and because I want to get into a little bit of detail, and I apologize if this is going on very long. I said it was going to be a short part. I I misjudged my ramblingness. But anyway, so take a look at this.
And found out that up to 70 or more % of youth in evangelical, Bible-believing colleges, when they leave for secular college, within a year they consider their religious beliefs fluid or irrelevant. They no longer believe in what the Bible has to say. What in the world's going on? How could we get to that point as a culture?
Things like scientific phenomena that they were raised being told is so infinitely complex that only a supernatural deity could have even begun to make it possible. And then they sit in a class and they have, step by step, somebody explain exactly how it works, how the mechanics work. Suddenly, it's not so mysterious anymore. Suddenly, the scientific explanation makes a little bit of sense. And finally, they look and they go, holy crap, well, nothing I was told in my church school is a fact. Lots of us went through that. You'll find a ton of YouTube atheists that went through exactly that same experience. And it doesn't, like I said, it doesn't surprise me a bit if 70% walk away. I don't think that's a problem with the secular world. I think it's a problem with your religion. It's, you got to take a little bit of the blame there. I mean, I know. Okay, let me try to. I know a lot of very strong Christians, people who are have a great deal of faith and are they're regular churchgoers. They embrace their religion. It's an important part of their lives, right? But who also embrace new findings in science. They're not threatened by learning about how the world actually works. It's like their faith is like an accordion folder that only gets bigger the more they learn about the natural world. While the faith of the kids that you guys are putting out is crushed by facts. It's crushed by evidence in the real world. And, again, I'm gonna end this. I never thought I'd say this, but I'm gonna end this with a little bit, some words from, I guess I'll have to call him current voice of reason.
I know people are probably trying to lynch me when I say this, but Bishop Ussher, God bless him, wasn't inspired by the Lord when he said it all took 6,000 years. It just didn't. And you go back in time, you've got radiocarbon dating, you've got all these things, and you've got the carcasses of dinosaurs